A billionaire married a paralyzed girl as a cruel bet, but discovered a life-changing secret within a month? Elliot Thorne had it all: an empire of hotels, a fleet of luxury cars, and an address in the most coveted zip code of Manhattan. But behind the picture-perfect facade of success was a man haunted by his past and driven by the need to constantly prove himself. To his circle of elite friends, Elliot was not just a businessman but an enigma. Behind the sharp suits and charismatic smile was someone who thrived on risks, even in situations where others saw danger. Among these friends was Derek Hayes, a college rival who had always enjoyed challenging Elliot. One fateful evening at a lavish charity gala, Derek proposed a bet. He dared Elliot to marry a paralyzed woman for a month, claiming that even Elliot's charm couldn't manage the emotional weight of such a bond. At first, Elliot scoffed at the absurdity of the idea, but after a few drinks and prodding from others, his ego refused to let it go. That's when Amelia Reynolds entered the picture. A former ballet prodigy, Amelia's life had taken a cruel turn after a car accident left her paralyzed. With her grace and dignity still intact, she became an unexpected candidate for the unthinkable bet. Amelia lived in a quaint apartment on the outskirts of Brooklyn, her life now revolving around art therapy and quiet afternoons spent painting. Once destined for greatness on the global stage, she had accepted her new reality with a resilience that both inspired and confused those around her. Despite her tragic circumstances, she never sought pity, wearing her scars as badges of survival. Elliot, intrigued by her strength, saw the perfect opportunity to prove Derek wrong. With his charm and resources, he believed he could win Amelia over, or at least endure the pretense for a month. To him, it was just a game. He approached Amelia with an offer that seemed too good to be true: a marriage proposal. In exchange, she would receive a significant sum of money that could ease her financial struggles and allow her to invest in her art projects. Amelia hesitated. She had spent years avoiding entanglements, especially with men whose intentions seemed questionable, but the financial freedom Elliot offered could change her life. After days of soul-searching, Amelia agreed. What she didn't know was that the proposal was born out of a bet, a truth that would shatter her trust and change both of their lives forever. The wedding was a whirlwind, arranged in record time, as Elliot wanted to get the bet over with as quickly as possible. Held in a luxurious rooftop garden overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the ceremony had all the glamour of a billionaire's event. Amelia, dressed in an elegant lace gown, sat in her wheelchair, her eyes reflecting a mix of vulnerability and strength. Elliot, ever the confident groom, played his role to perfection, charming the guests and Amelia alike. Behind the scenes, whispers among Elliot's friends revealed the truth. To them, Amelia was nothing more than a pawn in a game of ego. Derek smirked knowingly as he observed Elliot's performance, silently anticipating his failure. Amelia, unaware of the cruel wager, focused on the possibility of a fresh start. Though her instincts warned her about Elliot's too-good-to-be-true demeanor, she allowed herself to hope. As the newlyweds moved into Elliot's sprawling penthouse, the atmosphere was cold and transactional. Elliot's world was one of steel and glass, luxurious but devoid of warmth. For Amelia, the unfamiliar surroundings symbolized a new chapter, but little did she know that beneath the surface, a storm was brewing that would test her resilience like never before. Days turned into weeks, and the cracks in their arrangement began to show. Elliot's superficial charm wore thin, revealing a man who was emotionally guarded and unaccustomed to genuine connections. Amelia, with her innate kindness, tried to breach the walls he had built around himself, but her efforts were met with indifference or subtle hostility. The stark contrast between her vulnerability and his cold detachment made their marriage feel like an uphill battle. However, Amelia's strength shone through in unexpected ways. Her art, a reflection of her innermost thoughts, became her solace. She spent hours in the small studio Elliot had set up for her, losing herself in colors and textures. Her paintings, vibrant and full of life, stood in stark contrast to the sterile environment of the penthouse. Elliot, despite himself, found moments of curiosity creeping in. One evening, he wandered into her studio, drawn by the vivid hues of a canvas depicting a sunrise. Amelia, catching him off guard, spoke about the symbolism of hope and renewal in her work. Her words stirred something in him, a feeling he couldn't quite name. It was the first time he saw Amelia not as a part of the bet, but as a person with depth and resilience. As the days passed, Elliot began noticing subtle changes in his life. Amelia's presence, though understated, began filling the cold, sterile atmosphere of his penthouse. Her art, initially confined to the studio Elliot had set up for her as part of their arrangement, was slowly spilling into other areas of the house. Vibrant canvases adorned the walls, replacing abstract pieces chosen by decorators. Every time Elliot passed by one of Amelia's paintings, he couldn't help but pause. They were vivid, alive, and seemed to tell stories far beyond the brushstrokes. Elliot found himself drawn to her studio late at night, watching her paint from the shadows. Her focus was captivating, the way her hands moved delicately across the canvas, her eyes narrowing as she brought her visions to life. Amelia, though aware of his silent presence, never acknowledged him directly. She let him linger, sensing that he was drawn not only to her art but to the peace it brought her. Their interactions, once curt and formal, began to shift. Amelia's warmth, though subtle, softened the edges of Elliot's guarded demeanor. He started asking her about her paintings, what inspired them, what emotions she poured into them. At first her answers were cautious, but as days turned into weeks, she opened up. She spoke about her ballet career, the accident, and how painting had become her lifeline. Amelia also began to see glimpses of vulnerability in Elliot. One evening, during a rare conversation over dinner, he asked her about the accident that had changed her life. "How did you rebuild yourself after everything?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Amelia paused, her fork hovering midair. "I had to find meaning in what was left," she said. "At first I was angry, at the world, at the driver, at myself. But then I realized I had a choice. I could let it destroy me, or I could use it to create something new." Her words stayed with Elliot long after the meal ended. For the first time, he began to question the foundations of his own life. He had spent years chasing wealth and power, but Amelia's strength and resilience made him wonder if he had been running from something deeper all along. Amelia's resilience was not just evident in her art, but also in her interactions with others. She had begun volunteering at a local community center, offering art therapy to children and adults dealing with their own struggles. When she invited Elliot to visit the center one afternoon, he hesitated. The idea of stepping into a world so far removed from his comfort zone unsettled him. But something about Amelia's quiet determination compelled him to agree. At the center, Elliot was unprepared for what he saw. The room was filled with people of all ages, each absorbed in their creative projects. Some were painting. Others were working with clay or sketching. The atmosphere was warm and buzzing with quiet energy. Amelia moved through the room effortlessly, offering encouragement and guidance. She spent extra time with a young boy whose shaky hands struggled to control his brush, her patience never wavering. Elliot watched from a corner, feeling out of place yet deeply moved. For the first time in years, he saw people finding joy and purpose in something that wasn't tied to wealth or success. It was a stark contrast to his own world of boardrooms and balance sheets. After the session, Amelia found him standing by a window, staring out at the city skyline. "What did you think?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Elliot turned to her, his expression unreadable. "It's different, but I can see why it's important to you." Amelia smiled, sensing the weight behind his words. She knew Elliot wasn't used to vulnerability, not in himself and not in others. "Sometimes it's the simplest things that heal us," she said. Elliot didn't respond, but her words stayed with him as they returned to the penthouse. That night, He found himself standing in Amelia's studio, staring at a half-finished canvas. Without thinking, he picked up a brush and added a small stroke of color. It was a clumsy addition, but when Amelia found it the next morning, she smiled. As Elliot and Amelia's lives began to intertwine, their connection deepened in unexpected ways. Elliot, once the picture of indifference, found himself drawn not only to Amelia's art, but to her unwavering strength. He started joining her on walks through the city, pushing her wheelchair and listening to her observations about the world around them. Amelia's perspective was refreshing, unburdened by the cynicism that often clouded Elliot's thoughts. Their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed. Derek, ever the antagonist, began to sense that Elliot's feelings toward Amelia were shifting. During a casual poker night with friends, Derek couldn't resist probing. "So, how's the wife?" he asked, his tone laced with mockery. Elliot's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. "She's doing fine," he said curtly, hoping to end the conversation. But Derek wasn't finished. "You know, it's funny," he continued, swirling his drink. "I didn't think you'd last this long. What's the secret? Is she just that good at playing the part?" The room fell silent, the weight of Derek's words hanging in the air. Elliot's gaze hardened. "That's enough, Derek," he said, his voice low but firm. For the first time, Elliot felt a flicker of shame, not just for the bet but for the man he had been when he agreed to it. The idea of Amelia being reduced to a part in their charade made his stomach churn. Back at the penthouse, Elliot found himself confiding in Amelia more and more. One evening he shared a memory from his childhood, a rare moment of vulnerability. "My father used to say that emotions were a weakness," he admitted. "I think I've spent my whole life trying to prove him wrong, but somewhere along the way I lost myself." Amelia listened quietly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Maybe it's time to stop proving things to others and start living for yourself," she said gently. As their bond deepened, Amelia began noticing changes in Elliot. He was no longer the aloof, guarded man she had married. He started making time for her art therapy sessions, offering to sponsor the community center to expand its programs. Amelia, though cautious, couldn't deny the warmth growing between them. One evening, as they shared a quiet moment on the penthouse balcony, Elliot found himself opening up. "I didn't expect this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Expect what?" Amelia asked, looking up at him. "You," Elliot replied. "I didn't expect you to matter this much." Amelia's heart raced, but before she could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. It was Derek. His arrival was unexpected, and his presence felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. "Nice place, Elliot," Derek said, stepping inside uninvited. His gaze landed on Amelia, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "I see the bet is going better than expected." Amelia froze, the words hanging in the air like a thunderclap. Elliot's heart sank as he realized the truth was out, and Amelia had just heard it. Amelia's world shattered as Derek's cruel words echoed in the grand, silent penthouse. "The bet is going better than expected." Though softly spoken, the impact was thunderous. Her hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, as if grounding herself from the weight of the revelation. "Bet?" she asked, her voice trembling but sharp. Her gaze locked onto Elliot, demanding answers. Elliot's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Derek, unaware of, or perhaps reveling in, the havoc he'd caused, leaned back with a smug grin. "Oh, come on, Elliot. Don't tell me you didn't plan to let her in on the big joke. You know how this whole fairy tale romance started as a dare." "Enough, Derek," Elliot barked, his voice breaking under the strain of his mounting regret. But Amelia wasn't letting go. Her voice, usually calm and steady, cut through the tension. "What is he talking about?" she demanded. "Elliot, tell me he's lying." For the first time, Elliot, the man who always had an answer for everything, was at a loss. "Amelia, I can explain, he stammered, stepping toward her. Explain? She shot back, her voice laced with disbelief. Explain how you turned my life into some twisted game? Explain how you looked me in the eye every day, knowing the truth and saying nothing? Elliot's shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. It wasn't like that, he said weakly. At first, yes, it started as a bet. But then what? Amelia interrupted, her voice rising. You suddenly decided I was worth more than a joke? That I deserved your pity? Or did you just get bored of pretending? Derek, sensing he had overstayed his welcome, stood and adjusted his coat. Well, I can see this is my cue to leave. Good luck, Elliot. Looks like you'll need it. He smirked one last time before disappearing through the door. The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia's chest heaved as she struggled to contain the storm of emotions raging inside her. Betrayal, anger, humiliation, and heartbreak. You should go, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot hesitated, but the look in her eyes left no room for argument. He turned and left the room, his footsteps heavy with regret. Amelia sat in the silence of her studio, the place that had always brought her solace now offering none. The room seemed to close in around her as memories of the past few months flooded her mind. Every smile, every kind gesture, every moment she had begun to trust Elliot. They all felt like lies now. She wheeled herself to a blank canvas, her hands trembling as she picked up a brush. Her strokes were wild and chaotic, reflecting the turmoil within her. The colors clashed violently, blending into a storm of reds, blacks, and grays. Elliot paced in the living room, his mind racing. He had made mistakes before, but this felt irreversible. For the first time in his life, he cared about someone deeply, and he had destroyed it with his arrogance and thoughtlessness. Unable to stay away, he made his way to the studio and knocked softly on the door. Amelia? He called, his voice tentative. There was no answer. Gathering his courage, he pushed the door open. Amelia didn't look up. Her focus remained on the canvas before her. What do you want, Elliot? She asked, her tone flat. I need to explain, he began, stepping inside. I need you to know that this wasn't just a bet for me anymore. She laughed bitterly, the sound devoid of any warmth. How convenient. Now that the truth is out, it suddenly means more to you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Elliot said, his voice cracking. But I need you to know that you've changed me, Amelia. You've shown me what it means to care about something real, to care about someone real. Amelia finally turned to face him, her eyes red from unshed tears. You think that justifies what you did? You think saying you care makes this hurt any less? Elliot fell silent, the weight of her words crushing him. Get out, she said, her voice firm despite the tears streaming down her face. I don't want to see you right now. Reluctantly, Elliot left, the door closing softly behind him. But as he walked away, he made a silent vow to do whatever it took to make things right. Elliot spent the following days trying to repair the damage he had caused. He canceled all his meetings, ignored Derek's calls, and poured his energy into Amelia's world. He reached out to the community center, offering to fund an expansion of their art therapy program. He organized an anonymous donation to ensure Amelia's students could have the supplies they needed for years to come. It wasn't enough to fix what he had done, but it was a start. Amelia, meanwhile, threw herself into her work. Painting became her escape, a way to channel her pain into something tangible. Her studio became a haven where she could lose herself in the colors and textures of her art. One evening, as she prepared for an art exhibit showcasing her students' work, she found a package waiting for her. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a paintbrush-shaped pendant. Alongside it was a note, "For the woman who taught me how to create beauty out of chaos." Amelia stared at the note, her emotions warring within her. Part of her wanted to throw it away, to reject any gesture from Elliot. But another part of her, the part that had seen the man beneath the bravado, hesitated. The night of the art exhibit arrived, and the gallery was filled with guests admiring the work of Amelia's students. The energy in the room was electric, the walls adorned with paintings that told stories of resilience, hope, and transformation. Amelia, dressed in a flowing gown that highlighted her elegance, moved through the crowd with grace. She greeted guests, beaming with pride for her students. But her smile faltered when she spotted Elliot standing near the entrance. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Elliot approached her slowly, his expression cautious but hopeful. "I didn't want to intrude," he said. "I just wanted to see your work." Amelia studied him, searching his face for any trace of the man who had hurt her. What she saw instead was vulnerability and regret. "You've been busy," she said, her tone neutral. "I had a lot to make up for," Elliot replied. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Finally, Amelia spoke. "You broke my trust, Elliot. That's not something that can be fixed overnight." "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I just wanted you to know that I see you, Amelia. I see your strength, your talent, your heart. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of being in your life, if you'll let me." Amelia's heart ached with conflicting emotions. She wanted to hold on to her anger, to protect herself from further pain. But deep down, she also saw the sincerity in Elliot's eyes. "Maybe," she said softly. "We can start by being honest with each other." Elliot nodded, a small, hopeful smile breaking through his somber expression. "Maybe." As the night continued, Amelia found herself letting her guard down, if only slightly. The wounds Elliot had caused were still raw, but for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that healing was possible. The atmosphere of the gallery hummed with excitement, but for Amelia it was hard to shake the conversation she had shared with Elliot earlier on the terrace. The evening had been a celebration of her students' work, a culmination of their dedication and growth. Yet Elliot's presence lingered in her thoughts, not as a distraction, but as an unresolved thread that needed clarity. As the last of the guests filtered out, Amelia retreated to a quieter corner of the gallery. She looked at one particular painting, a vivid, swirling composition by Sophie, one of her most talented students. Sophie's journey from timid self-doubt to creating such powerful art was a testament to resilience and belief. Amelia had been the one to guide her, but tonight she could not ignore the parallels to her own life. Elliot had stayed until the very end, his eyes occasionally drifting to Amelia as he spoke with others. He could see the pride she carried for her students, the warmth she offered to everyone around her. Yet he felt like an outsider, part of her world, but only by her permission. He respected the distance she maintained, knowing that rebuilding trust required patience. Finally, Amelia approached him, her wheelchair moving gracefully across the floor. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice polite but guarded. Elliot straightened, surprised by her initiation of the conversation. "Of course, I would not miss it for anything," he replied. "This event, it is remarkable, Amelia. Your work is transformative." Her lips curled into a faint smile, but her eyes remained unreadable. "It is not my work. It is theirs," she said, gesturing toward the students' artwork. "They did this. I just helped them see what they were capable of." Elliot hesitated, then spoke. "You do not just help them see it. You make them believe in it. That is what makes you extraordinary." Amelia's expression softened for a moment before she looked away. "Words are easy, Elliot. Belief comes from actions." The weight of her words settled between them like a tangible presence. Elliot nodded, understanding the layers of meaning in her statement. "I know," he said quietly, "and I am willing to spend as long as it takes proving that I can be the man you deserve." Amelia did not respond immediately. Instead, she turned her attention back to the gallery, where the remnants of the evening still lingered. "Time will tell," she said finally, before retreating into the quiet solitude of her thoughts. The following days were a whirlwind of activity for Amelia, as the success of the exhibit drew increased attention to her community art program. Donations began pouring in, and she received invitations to collaborate with other organizations. Though grateful for the recognition, Amelia's heart remained heavy. The unresolved tension between her and Elliot lingered, casting a shadow over her accomplishments. Elliot, on the other hand, had thrown himself into his work. Not his business, but the foundation he had established to support art therapy programs. Inspired by Amelia's work, he had committed to expanding its reach, funding projects in underserved communities. Each meeting, each decision, felt like a step toward redemption, though he knew his efforts might never fully erase the pain he had caused. One afternoon, Amelia received an invitation to tour a new art space that Elliot's foundation had funded. Initially, she hesitated. She was wary of Elliot's motivations, unsure if this was another attempt to win her forgiveness. But curiosity, and a small flicker of hope, led her to accept. The space was located in a repurposed warehouse, its industrial architecture transformed into a vibrant, welcoming hub for creativity. Walls were adorned with artwork created by local children, and the air buzzed with excitement as staff and volunteers prepared for the center's official opening. Elliot greeted her at the entrance, his demeanor respectful but clearly nervous. "Thank you for coming," he said. Amelia nodded, her expression neutral. "It is an impressive space," she said, glancing around. "You have done a lot here." "I could not have done it without your inspiration," Elliot admitted. "Your work showed me what is possible when you give people a chance to express themselves." Amelia raised an eyebrow, skeptical of his humility, but unable to deny the sincerity in his voice. "It is a good start," she said. "But inspiration only takes you so far. Sustaining this kind of work requires commitment." "I am ready to commit," Elliot said, his tone firm. "Not just to this, but to being better, every day." Amelia regarded him carefully, her heart conflicted. She could see the changes in him, but trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been shattered. "We will see," she said finally, before continuing her tour of the space. As Amelia explored the new art center, she could not help but notice the small details that spoke to Elliot's involvement. The brightly colored furniture, the accessibility features, the walls lined with art supplies, all reflected a genuine effort to create a space that welcomed everyone. Elliot trailed behind her, giving her space to take it all in. He had spent weeks overseeing every detail of the project, determined to honor Amelia's vision. He hoped that the space would serve as a bridge, not just between them, but between their worlds. When Amelia reached a quiet corner of the center, she paused in front of a mural that had been painted by local children. It depicted a vibrant sunrise with the words, "New Beginnings," written in bold letters beneath it. Elliot stepped beside her, his voice soft. That mural was their idea. They wanted something that symbolized hope. Amelia nodded, her fingers brushing the edge of her wheelchair. "Hope is important," she said, "but it has to be earned." "I understand," Elliot said, "and I know I have a long way to go. But I hope this can be a step in the right direction." Amelia turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "It is not just about the space, Elliot. It is about what you do with it and why you are doing it." Elliot met her gaze, his eyes filled with resolve. "I am doing it because of what you taught me. You showed me how to see beyond myself, and I want to honor that lesson." Amelia's heart ached at his words. She wanted to believe him, but the pain of his betrayal still lingered. "Time will tell," she said again, her voice tinged with both caution and hope. Over the next few weeks, Amelia and Elliot found themselves crossing paths more often, their lives slowly intertwining once more. Elliot continued to volunteer at the community center, working alongside Amelia and her students. Though their interactions remained professional, there was an undeniable warmth growing between them, a fragile but persistent connection that neither could ignore. One evening, after a particularly successful art therapy session, Amelia found herself lingering at the center, tidying up after the students had left. Elliot was there too, carefully packing away supplies. "Thank you for staying," Amelia said, breaking the silence. "It is the least I can do," Elliot replied. "I enjoy being here." Amelia hesitated, then spoke. "You have changed, Elliot. I can see that. But change is not enough. I need to know that this is real, that you are real." Elliot set down the supplies and turned to face her. "Amelia, I do not know how to convince you, but I promise you this. Everything I am doing now, I am doing because of what you have taught me. I want to be the kind of person who deserves your trust." Amelia's eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, Elliot's transformation was genuine. As they locked eyes, the faintest glimmer of a new beginning sparked between them, a fragile but undeniable hope that the wounds of the past could heal, and that the future, though uncertain, held the promise of something better. Weeks turned into months, and while the journey was far from easy, both Amelia and Elliot began to find a new rhythm. Their interactions, once strained and filled with unspoken tension, grew softer and more meaningful. Though Amelia maintained her cautious boundaries, she no longer kept Elliot entirely at arm's length. Elliot, for his part, had committed himself fully to his new path. He continued his work with the Art Foundation, expanding its reach to underserved communities across the city. The Warehouse Art Center became a hub of creativity and healing, drawing people from all walks of life. His presence there was no longer performative. It was genuine, a reflection of the person he was striving to become. Amelia watched these changes quietly, her heart slowly warming to the man Elliot was becoming. While she still guarded herself against further hurt, she could not deny the impact of his transformation. It was not the grand gestures or public declarations that moved her, but the small, consistent actions that revealed his sincerity. One evening, as they worked side by side at the Art Center, Amelia spoke. "I see you, Elliot. I see the effort you are making, and I want you to know that it matters." Elliot looked up from the paints he was organizing, her words catching him off guard. He saw the softness in her expression, the cautious but genuine warmth that had been absent for so long. "It matters because you matter, Amelia," he replied, his voice steady. "You always have. I just did not realize it until it was almost too late." Amelia nodded, her heart aching at the memory of their early days together. "I am not saying everything is fixed," she said, "but I am willing to see where this goes, if you are willing to be patient." Elliot's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Patience is the least I can give," he said. "You have taught me that real change takes time. I am not going anywhere, Amelia." As the weeks passed, their connection deepened. They began to spend more time together outside of the Art Center, sharing quiet dinners and taking walks in the park. Amelia found herself opening up more, sharing stories of her past that she had never spoken of before. Elliot, in turn, shared his own struggles, his vulnerabilities laid bare in a way he had never allowed before. One crisp autumn afternoon, Amelia and Elliot found themselves in her favorite park, surrounded by the vibrant hues of changing leaves. Amelia paused beneath a towering oak tree, her wheelchair positioned to face the sunlight filtering through the branches. "I used to come here all the time before the accident," she said, her voice filled with nostalgia. "It was my thinking spot, where I would plan my routines and dream about the future." Elliot crouched beside her, his gaze focused on her face. "And now?" he asked gently. "Now, it is still my thinking spot," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "But my dreams are different. I have learned to dream of things that are within my reach, not because I have given up, but because I have learned to appreciate what truly matters." Elliot reached for her hand, his touch light but steady. "You have taught me that too," he said. "I never knew what mattered until I met you." Amelia looked at him, her heart softening further. "Maybe," she said. "We're both learning from each other." Elliot nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Maybe we are." Months later, the Art Center hosted its largest event yet, a community showcase that drew hundreds of attendees. Amelia's students displayed their work proudly, and Elliot's foundation had provided resources to make the event a success. As Amelia moved through the crowd, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was her dream brought to life, not just for herself, but for the countless people whose lives had been touched by the program. Elliot watched her from a distance, his heart full of admiration. She was radiant, her resilience and strength shining brighter than ever. As she caught his gaze, she smiled, a gesture that spoke volumes. At the end of the evening, as they stood together on the center's terrace, Amelia turned to Elliot. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "For proving me wrong," she said. "For showing me that people can change." Elliot took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "You changed me, Amelia, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never forget that." In that moment, beneath the starry sky, they both knew they had found something rare and beautiful, a second chance at life, love, and redemption.